Did you play much of a role in terms of mentoring other women at the bar, or did you attend many Women Lawyers Association functions?
No, no time for the functions, but I did see a lot of new women lawyers in my chambers. I would say, come up and I'll give you any tips that might be useful. I remember one tip that I gave, though, which is unbelievable at this stage. I used to say to them, do not learn how to type. If you know how to type, you'll be typing your opinions and advices. That's your secretary's job. Do not learn how to type. And I mean, that's laughable now when everybody's using computers and must know how to type.
But then you weren't to know that that was going to happen.
That's very true. When I left the bar in 89, there were only just computer courses for lawyers. And before that, when computers first came in, there were two chaps on my floor who spent endless hours in the evenings learning the DOS code system because there was no mouse at that time. And they spent hours trying to work their computers. And I think this put everybody else off, thinking if it's this hard, we're not going to bother.
Mind you, it could have been the equivalent of the men's shed for them. They might have actually enjoyed it.
They probably did. Another example, too, of the early computers, I was junior to Silk in a case in Melbourne, and we had to look up, it involved the interpretation of the word, I think, determine. And so this Silk, who was way ahead in technology, said, "Okay, we'll look that up on the law reports on the internet." And of course, we got something like 55,000 results, and determine in all of its various meanings. It was absolutely useless to us.
Yes, and that raises another interesting question. You alluded to this when we spoke yesterday. The photocopier, the advent of the photocopier, has, in a sense, meant a great deal more extraneous and sometimes irrelevant materials being brought to barristers' attention, and obviously judges too, but barristers in particular. All kinds of materials just get sent up to you, don't they?
I curse the advent of the photocopier. Before that, your instructing solicitor would go through all his papers and include in your brief only the relevant documents, the ones that you needed to see. After photocopiers, the solicitor would just hand it to the clerk and say, copy everything. Every document got copied. They were put into multiple huge, those lever arch files, loaded onto a trolley and dumped in your chambers. And of course, you can't afford to overlook anything. You have to read it all just in case there's something in there that you need to know. And this just made preparing for cases so much harder. And really, we were doing solicitors' work.
Yes. Was that ever taken up with perhaps the Bar Council, or were there any sort of thundering imperatives issued from the Bar Council perhaps? I don't know. I'm trying to think, was there some sort of communication of displeasure about these developments?
Not that I was aware of. We just put up with it.
Yes. Any other sort of contrasts between then and now that strike you, looking back?
Well, the mobile phone is one. In the early days, I did a lot of work down in the magistrates' courts down in Liverpool Street. And if you'd forgotten something or needed to check something for tomorrow's brief, you had to go and find a public phone that wasn't being used and ring up. Nowadays, with mobile phones, it would be so much easier just to. It may also be a nuisance if you'd forgotten to turn it off in court, but for contacting your chambers when you're away from chambers, that mobile phone would have been wonderful.
And I guess your ESP wasn't quite up there yet.
No, indeed. I remember an early device too before fax machines were invented. I think the Commonwealth Crown Solicitor in Canberra was the first one to have a primitive device called a Vocadex. And this Vocadex would transmit like the current fax machines do, but the ink would always blur, and it was a terrible thing. But our chambers did get one. I think it was about the mid-70s, and that was the forerunner of the fax machine.